Ghostrunner is a game, and it's a fucking good one at that. And it's one I first found because a trailer for it dropped like a week before the Cyberpunk 2077 deep dive video. I was all caught up in the hype and looking for more Cyberpunk, and judging by the views on the trailer I watched, titled Ghostrunner New Cyberpunk Gameplay, I wasn't the only one who found it this way. Little clickbaity, but considering the 10-minute demo that dropped on the 5th of May has run me about 7 hours of playtime from the time of writing this, it's one of the few occasions I'd probably thank someone for it. I mean, look at this shit, man. It's tasty. And I'm not just talking about the combat either. This thing is clean. The closest comparison I can draw is to Doom Eternal, a full game that came out semi-recently, which equally had combat that makes your trousers get a little tighter. The platforming sections, man, they were too long and not deep enough to justify it in my opinion. It was all basic shit a toddler could work out if you handed them the controls with enough time. Just make sure to take them off it again before a mancubus bursts through a wall like shit through a kid's diaper. And certainly don't let them do any of this. Okay, I did kind of go a bit overboard there, but I enjoyed it, so I'm keeping it. But anyways, where was I? Ah yeah, the platforming. For the first level of the game, the platforming is nothing you wouldn't expect. It's straightforward, feels cool, and is really forgiving. Just like the combat is. For fights, they give you one enemy, then 3, then 4, and some points they really push the boat out and throw in a 5th. But at each stage, they're fair to the player. They give you lots of cover, they give you multiple routes of attack, and let you choose how you want to approach it. It's tough, and there's definitely a learning curve to it, but with the limited time they have with the player, you can easily piece together in your head the scope of what to expect from the game come its full release. But the bit you don't see, and the bit that makes this demo truly great, is that most importantly of all, they actually let you skip almost every engagement entirely if you want to. I'll get round to why. Here's where we draw parallels to the platforming. They start with the basics, teaching you how to jump, then to wall run, then to chain wall runs together. They show you how to slide, how to grapple, and how to dash, and the different ways you can use it. That's it for the platforming tutorials, but that is not it for the platforming. Through my years of playing games, tutorials have conditioned me to think the routes you have access to are always clearly marked, and often trying to do anything else will result in immediate disappointment and an indeterminably long drop down a void John from Level Design didn't bother drawing the bottom to. So the first time through, I followed the beaten path, expecting if I did anything else, I'd either strike an invisible wall or be greeted with janky, unplatformable hitboxes. But if you look at any one of the 50-odd good speedruns that were submitted within the first 2 days of release for this video game demo, you would struggle to find any that sit within those clearly marked routes. This was when I realised Ghostrunner's demo was more than any other simple game demo. This thing's got more than just what it tells you in its tutorials. It's got more platforming than the lights on the wall's usual game knowledge begs you to follow, and it's got movement options even more deep and engaging than any of its combat. When I replayed this video game demo for my 7th hour, I replayed it for the platforming. There's a learning curve to it they don't even introduce, but it's there. Oh lordy, it's there, and not every player will experience it, but by having an actual in-game timer, they encourage the player to try again and to explore it. Even then, if a player doesn't discover the extent of what's there with the platforming, you're introduced to enough elements that you can easily piece together in your head the scope of what's surely to come on release. And it excites me. Now, I've not played every first-person platformer, I would even go as far as to say that I've played none of them. But I asked my friend Charlie, and he said Ghostrunner's got the core to be one of the best. It all depends on the level design for the full game, and the balance they strike between the platforming and the combat. It's like Mirror's Edge, but if the devs discovered Synthwave and LSD one weekend, and went all in after they found a sword behind the sofa. It's actually a genre I tend to avoid personally, because after a while, when it's the only thing a game's got going for it, it's really hard to feel engaged. Platforming like this should feel high octane, and if you've got strong platforming mechanics, everything else you introduce should feel equally as good. Otherwise you're setting players up to say but about your game. As in, this game's good, but I really thought the wet noodle gunplay was the weakest part.
That was a waste of bullets.
Or, this game's good, but the soundtrack didn't make me want to punch people in the street when I tried listening to it out in public. Now, so far, these aren't things people can say about Ghostrunner, 'cause fuck. Everything in this video game demo just feels so good.
Spotted in the area.
This 10-minute demo has legitimately been some of the most fun I've had with a game in a good while. And for just a demo to engage me as well as the gunplay from Doom Eternal, that's something truly special. My hopes going forward is that the full game will continue what this demo has laid the foundations to, and that's pretty much just more of what we've seen here. Fun combat that increases in difficulty as levels progress, and from the intro cutscene we can see they plan to introduce more enemy types, as well as a possible new attack power, which is great. More complicated and challenging platforming that remains open and free as this demo has been, for letting you run off the beaten path. And for them to introduce a few more abilities to play with. As throughout this demo, the voice in our head is constantly upgrading our software to give us new skills. And of course, I expected to have a bump in our soundtrack. I've seen some other people's thoughts on the game, and one of the main complaints is that for some people the difficulty is a bit much. Whilst I think the level of challenge so far has been perfect from my perspective, I'm sure the game wouldn't suffer from having a difficulty setting to let players take a couple more bullets, just so that people who don't have time to master each level can still find enjoyment from what's there. But if this difficulty is the developer's vision for the game, I ain't complaining. It's right where it needs to be in my opinion, which is the one that counts. It's a full experience that crescendos in complexity the more you play it. The story's even good. It's not great, but it's exactly what it needs to be. It's not over-ambitious, and it doesn't get in the way of the gameplay. And just like everything else, it's deeper than just the surface level. Because if you go off the beaten track, there's little snippets of storytelling to be found.
He's here. Don't make a sound.
And it even ends on a good cliffhanger, because there's nothing worse than an anticlimax. But the 23-second long, unskippable intro sequence sucks shit, 4 out of 10.